By any standard, the real estate market at the moment is generating unprecedented interest. The question is, how do you get the attention of an increasingly better educated client base? Buyers and sellers alike have a voracious appetite for property information about their area. Area profile booklets are the perfect answer for the current mood. You may have noticed these types of publications popping up in your letterbox. They contain sales data and historical trends of all properties sold in your suburb or postcode over a given period of time. Personalise your report with your own properties and profiles highlighting and demonstrating your successes. Area profile booklets are available both in hard copy and online versions. The high retention rate of the hard copy version makes it an ideal product to letterbox drop and generate your next inquiry, whilst the online version can be sent to your existing database, eager to know the latest market trends in your area. Want to know more about area profile booklets? Click the More Information button or contact our Printforce specialist to discuss various options available.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Property News Update. This time our guest is coming from the USA. I'll introduce Ben to you in just a moment. Before we do, these are the stories that Ben and I are going to talk about today in our show. Amazon does more than just buy real estate. Megan cuts her LA ties. Cut your losses now, unit owners are told in a very stark warning. We take you to a very popular BBC TV set which is up for sale. And a Friend star and their ultimate LA bachelor pad. Back with Ben Brady in just a moment.
Did you know you can save up to 70% on your staff costs by outsourcing the low-value, repeatable tasks so your team can focus on growing your business? Beepo is an outsourcing provider focused on the real estate industry. With an English-speaking, tertiary qualified and fully trained team in the Philippines, Beepo will give your business the boost it needs to start growing and returning value to you. For more information, visit beepo.com.au.
Welcome back to the show, and joining me all the way from Los Angeles, Ben Brady from the Harcourts Auction Group. G'day Ben, welcome to the show.
Hi Kevin, wonderful to be here, mate.
Yes, was in your patch earlier this year. Tell me where you are right now.
Mate, we're in Aliso Viejo, which to give some context to where that is for people, it's about an hour and a half south of LA. People often mistaken where we live in Orange County for LA, but it's actually in between LA and San Diego, smack bang in the middle. Laguna Beach is the best reference point for people. I'm about 10 minutes away from Laguna Beach is where our office is based here in Southern California.
Yeah, mate, I've only been to the US a couple of times, and I was there when I was a much younger person than I am now, and I went to San Diego and I instantly fell in love with that place. I thought it was just absolutely outstanding. Reminded me very much of Townsville, you know, with all the palm trees and you know, close to the water and so on. But a lovely spot that you're in, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, wonderful part of the world, mate. We enjoy it, and the real estate is spectacular here also.
Good. Well, let's talk about that as well. But first off, we'll go to our first story. This one comes to us from Business 2. Amazon does more than buy real estate. Amazon, of course, in the news a lot, Ben, about what they're doing. But one of the world's largest e-commerce giants has decided that it's going to get into the US real estate space by helping people buy homes. Just interested to get your take on this. Have you heard much about this in the States, Ben?
Mate, it was something that was introduced not so long ago, but it was something that we always had anticipated that they were going to get into the real estate space, and there was a lot of talk around it. It's interesting, as somebody that is licensed, I actually hold a license in California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. And amongst those, when you're a real estate agent, you have you're on a certain realtors list that does get certain types of messages and propaganda and marketing and all that type of stuff all the time from third-party sources. And there was a source that continued to pepper the agents within our community about Amazon's coming to the real estate space. You know, we need to do an uprising. We can't have them in our space.
Oh,
and so
really?
on.
Yeah.
People were very paranoid about what they were what their involvement was going to be, because the paranoia comes from a couple of different avenues, Kevin, in the sense that you've got Zillow, who is a incredibly large real estate portal here, which I would say is the number one portal outside of Realtor.com and Trulia and Redfin and a few others. There's multiple ones that the MLS syndicates through to. However, Zillow has just announced iBuyer, where they will, if you're a consumer, you can go onto the Zillow website and you can press a button and they'll give you an instantaneous valuation about between 10 and 15% less than what market value might be, is what they seem to say.
Yeah, we've discussed iBuyer before. Sorry to interrupt you there, Ben, but we've discussed iBuyer before, and I think Keller Williams also are starting to dabble in that. Keller Williams is, of course, one of the big franchise groups in the States. So it is something we're going to see a lot more of. Interesting that you say Amazon are moving into that area.
Yeah, well, we always thought that they were going to move to that area as well, because of the sheer capacity that they have to raise capital and the fund that is behind them. But, you know, Open Door does it as well. And as you mentioned, Keller Williams, everybody. But it's actually a little bit of a turn that they've partnered with a real estate company, being Reology. Reology owning Coldwell Banker, Century 21, Sotheby's, Better Homes and Gardens, and a multitude of companies that is on the stock exchange. And really, I do believe that it was Reology's play that actually was the ploy in order to get them into the real estate space, really to help their share price as a publicly traded entity. And it only helped for a short period of time, because it's been consistently going down for, if you look on the stock exchange, it's been consistently going down for about 5 years. And it was interesting to see them come into the service attribute of the real estate transaction versus the actual physical element of buying, selling, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, just very quickly, mate, if you could, because I want to get on to the next story, but just quickly, what do you think what impact will it have on real estate agents?
Mate, I don't believe it's going to be a large impact at the moment. Yep. However, Amazon is truly I would call it a religion here. It is such a way of life that if I ever moved home to Australia, based on the feedback that I've gotten from many Australians, is that Amazon doesn't have it down pat in Australia whatsoever. Something that would be something that would be truly missed within our household. So Amazon will, just the brand will have some impact in Reology getting a little bit more business, but it won't make too large an impact from a perspective of the real estate climate until they decide to start buying or until they segue into be their own real estate company in its own right.
Excellent. Okay, we'll take you to our next story in just a moment. Before I do, I just want to remind you that Real Estate Talk, the show, is out tomorrow. The stories we're going to be covering for you, we'll have a look at some commercial property. I'll give you 5 great reasons why you need to put commercial property into your portfolio. How not to get too trendy when you're doing a renovation. We'll talk to Naomi Findlay and her great show, of course, on Property TV, the Reno show, is coming out on a regular basis. What buyers want in Brisbane. A lot of focus on the Brisbane market. Ben, and I know that not necessarily looking for a comment on this because I know you're based in the States, but you've got a bit of an understanding about what's happening in Brisbane. A lot of interest in the Brisbane market because it's one of the most affordable markets in Australia, Ben.
Yeah, no, lots of interest in the Brisbane marketplace at the moment, mate. But in saying that as well, is that why wouldn't there be, with it being such a livable culture and still being able to get from one end of Brisbane to another in about 10 to 15 minutes is certainly one of the draw points.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things that came out. It's a research paper that we'll talk about, and I talked to the authors of that, and they say what it is people are really looking for. Why are they attracted to Brisbane? And you've hit the nail on the head there. That's one of the big things. Where the growth has been as high as 40%, we're going to identify some areas around Australia where growth has been absolutely phenomenal over the last 3 years. And we talked to Louis Christopher from SQM Research about the latest vacancy rates. They're holding pretty steady, and we're seeing vacancies around Australia, Ben, holding steady, certainly under 3%. But Sydney seems to have blown out a little bit. Vacancy rates there approaching 4%, and that's sort of really tipping the market a bit, but we'll have a look at that. I want to take you now to story number 2. This one comes to us from QT, the Queensland Times. Interesting that this is an Australian paper publishing a story about LA, but I wanted to pick up on it. Meghan Markle selling her LA property. This is a home in California. Do you know this one at all, or we'll bring some photographs up of this. It's a typical colonial home in Los Angeles. Is it fairly typical of what you'd find there, Ben?
No, not at all. Actually, Kevin, having a look at the property photos, it actually isn't something that's very common whatsoever. It's quite a unique style, and they certainly wouldn't advertise it as a colonial property. That's certainly a very Queensland word to use to describe that type of property. It would be more of a California bungalow or something along those lines.
Yep.
But it's a unique style for LA for sure.
Yeah, the quoted figure is about 2.6 million Australian dollars. Is that fairly consistent with that area, do you know, or has that got a little bit of personality hype to it?
No, there's a little bit of you're buying a little bit of brand, obviously. There's no question about it. It's certainly in the outreaches of LA. Wouldn't certainly classify that as one of the premier neighbourhoods in any way, shape, or form, mate. Where you're thinking about your Beverly Hills, your Bel Airs, or your West Hollywoods, or whatever it may be. No. So certainly in one of the outliers, and not to mention as well is that if you were shaving a little bit of money off that in respect to the value that it actually really sits in the marketplace without having Megan living there, is it's probably something that's actually on the more affordable side of things for LA, for something that's relatively nice if you have a look through the photos.
Fair enough, yeah. And there's a bit of conjecture too as to whether she actually did live there or whether they rented that. That was from her previous marriage, of course. Anyway, we'll leave that up to someone else to decide. Let's take you to story number 3. My guest this week is Ben Brady, coming to us from the States. And Ben, of course, is with Harcourt's Auctions over there. We'll talk about that in just a moment, Ben. But before we do, Macro Business reporting that people should cut their losses. Now, this is a story to do with unit owners in Australia. A number of comments over the last week or so about this. Unit owners who were potentially waiting for prices to rebound were playing a bit of Russian roulette. And we're seeing this, there's been rumoured, oversupply of units in Australia for quite some time. But there's been a lot of disaster stories, particularly around the Sydney market with construction type. So I guess this really relates to new properties, Ben.
Sure. And Kevin, I think that being in the Brisbane marketplace, 5 years ago is when I actually sold a unit in Brisbane City that Callista, who is my better half, and I lived in prior to coming to the United States. I lived in the middle of the CBD in Charlotte Street, Charlotte Towers to be more precise, and we had a small little unit there that we had remodeled and sold and gave a little bit of character so that it wasn't outside of the norms. And we got out just in time, setting a record sale price for that unit through the auction. And ultimately after that, it just based on the volume of cranes that you looked in the air and the oversupply, but not to mention as well is that it's interesting to note as well, and again, whether this is accurate or it isn't accurate, it might be a little bit of rumour, is that from certainly my sources in Australia and being Brisbane more precisely, keeping my finger firmly on the pulse in that marketplace still, is that they're still approving unit developments in the West End corridor and things of that nature. So in the southern states, I could imagine as well, to make sure that jobs are maintaining in the construction sector and things of that nature, the approval level is still high. So as long as they're approving new buildings, Kevin, it's not going to make it any better in any way, shape or form. And also the quality of the product is just lipstick on a pig. It is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
So I do believe that as long as it's going to be cut rate product and it's going to also continue to be approved and continue to develop, it's going to really put a strain on the marketplace in oversupply and not a lot of demand. Australia is only so big, and that's the one thing that really I've learned moving to the United States, is that there's certain marketplaces here that could maintain that, but Australia is just not big enough and is not growing fast enough in order to maintain it.
Very good thoughts. I'm going to come back in just a moment. We'll take a quick break now. I want to bring you up to date on a popular BBC series set that is for sale. It's a warehouse. We'll tell you about it and we'll show you in just a moment. Back soon.
Your business card is a vital selling tool and a constant visual reminder of who you are, what you do, and more importantly, how you can be contacted. Introducing our new Velvet business cards, featuring a luxurious premium laminate that has a velvet texture and is soft to the touch. Printed on a resilient 450 GSM card, these cards can be printed with a range of spot gloss and foiling options to give your office that prestigious look.
Welcome back to the show. My guest is Ben Brady. Ben is currently coming to us from the US of A, and he is with Harcourt's Auctions over there. How are the auctions doing, mate? Are they starting to get a bit of traction?
Mate, we're really enjoying ourselves here at the moment. Is that this is our 5th year doing so. If you take out one of the years that we did for the arrangement of all the documentation and everything like that to adapt it to the marketplace, we're 47% up year on year from the previous year. And it just goes to show, Kevin, that the marketplace, you can drive down the main street of the US in any real suburb and have the choice of 55 different fast food chains, but you only really have one choice when it comes to selling your biggest asset, is selling it through the traditional sale. So it's created complacency, and as soon as we've come up with a logical alternative, like the way that we package up our auction, which is vastly different to the way that Australia does it, but still has the same principles attached, is that they've really taken it and really run with it as well. So
interesting. I hear you talk about that, but the feedback I get is that the Americans still look at us as the pioneers when it comes to auctioning property, not so much auction, but auctioning property. So it really is an interesting journey. That's why I'm following it so closely. But I want to get on to story number 4, and this one comes to us from Rightmove. Interesting that this Rightmove is an American company, but I think it's American. But the terminology Rightmove, that's the new terminology for downsizing, and I think it actually fits the model quite well. But anyway, this story, that's totally aside. This story is about a popular BBC TV series set, which is Dragon's Den. This is where people come down that staircase, Ben, and they do their pitch on their startup company in the hopes that they can get some funding. Interesting to look at these photographs and just see how small that set really is, because it looks so big in the show.
Well, it's interesting. I've been involved in a number of TV shows here in the States, and just recently one in Hawaii as well. And it's funny to see behind the scenes of what actually the reality is versus what they sort of simulcast over through the television itself, mate. Just like probably you're going to do some airbrushing on me as well, okay?
No. We'll leave it exactly the way it is, my friend. We'll do a bit of airbrushing on me, but not you.
But it's really interesting to see how tiny that really is, actually, having seen the show. But it's also, I had the opportunity to look at the Shark Tank one that they do here in the United States. I know they did it in Australia as well, but that was actually, it was very, very it was put together very poorly, I should say, when you actually got up close and saw it. And what they can do behind the scenes is incredible.
I don't know if you had a really close look at some of the photographs that we're flashing up on the screen of this location, but the chairs look pretty weathered to me, and in fact, you never see the back of the chairs, but they're all scratched and torn, and so. But it's all about how it looks from the front, isn't it?
Correct, mate. And the thing that I'm actually the most interested in is that they've got a little bit of lighting up there, but they have the natural light still coming in. It's not actually a studio itself where it's blacked out. I'm not sure if they do that for the show or they don't do it for the show, but very interesting to have the natural light coming in, because we actually have a virtual training studio that we've put together here, and the natural light is a killer. You've got to have the artificial light in order to make sure that it's a crisp, sharp looking show. So I'm not sure if the natural light would have been there when they were filming.
I think it's been several years since they were on that set, so probably it's changed dramatically. Matt, I want to take you to the last story. This one comes from Zillow, and we were talking about Zillow earlier. Friendstar Ultimate LA Bachelor Pad. Could the views from this pad be any better? This is owned by Matthew Perry, of course, from Friends. No doubt, mate, you would have been to a few parties there since you've arrived. You and Matt get on quite well, don't you?
It's interesting how an open house is conducted, or a broker open is conducted here in the States, mate, where they put on the sushi bar and they have drinks and they go for 12 hours and all of this type of stuff. It's very interesting indeed. But this is a quintessential Hollywood Hills mid-century modern property. That mid-century modern is a serious thing here. Now, not so much in LA, in some neighborhoods it is, but more so in, say, the desert in Palm Springs. They have a mid-century modern actual month in Palm Springs out in the desert, where they tour through with these mid-century modern homes and the designers that did them. And actually a mid-century modern home can sometimes fetch more in its original condition based on the architectural design and the architect himself than what a traditional property of brand new nature can as well.
Man, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, people still love those earlier styles. We may, quite often create new contemporary styles and modern styles, but people love to get back. I think that type of construction really is quite robust. You can pull walls out, you can make lots of changes. But interesting to note too, there's a lot of open plan in there, a lot of glass, so you can look at those fabulous views, but they're spectacular, that's for sure.
Yeah, they are, mate. And those type of properties, the construction here in California because of the earthquakes, not to mention just the United States in general here on the West Coast, is actually quite flimsy in the perspective of in Australia, it's bricks and mortar, mate, is what we talk about. But ultimately here in a mid-century modern home, first of all, you've got to be cautious of the asbestos, as you do have to be as well in Australia, in Queensland, no doubt about it. But here it's all just chipboard. It's all built off chipboard and all built off wood. Even the construction scaffolding is built from timber as well, mate. It's actually very flimsy. It's nowhere near the quality of construction, but it's 4 times the amount of money and 4 times the price. Like this property here, like you would go into the construction of this home, and an Australian looking at this property would be incredibly disappointed that at $13 million or $10 million plus, whatever it sells for, is that ultimately that you're really not getting a lot. You're seriously buying a brand. You're probably 80% of it is a brand.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine you're buying location there too, because that's just absolutely spectacular, as you can see from the photos. Hey, mate, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your very valuable time, Ben. I'll let you get back, because I think at the time we're talking to you, it's getting very late in the afternoon. So, mate, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Ben Brady, of course, from Harcourt's Auctions, breaking some tremendous ground there and flying the flag for Australia in terms of how we do our auctions. Ben Brady, all the best, my friend. Have a great day ahead and look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's been a pleasure, Kevin. Thank you for having me on.
And don't forget that we've got property auction insider out later today. And then, of course, Real Estate Talk is coming out tomorrow. Lots of programs coming your way. Check us out at propertytv.io. I'm Kevin Turner. I'll see you next time.